Hey guys, StarCraft here, and you guys wanted me to talk about Grant Morrison? Oh boy, do I have a lot to talk about with Grant Morrison. In fact, this may end up being my longest one. I don't know, but I have so much of Grant Morrison stuff. I mean, just look, all that Morrison, and unlike so much of the other, it's not just one long run. There's a whole bunch of individual stuff. So this is gonna take me a while. But what can I say about the man? The guy is pretty much a creative writing genius. I love so much of his work, and he's influenced me in a lot of ways of thinking things differently about stories. You wouldn't have thought that right away. Actually, no. You would know that right away from one of his earliest work, and that was Animal Man. Seriously, this started it all, and it was meant to be just 6 issues. Yeah, supposed to be meant to be a 6 issue miniseries, and I forget if it was either he had so much fun or he was doing so well they asked him to stick around, and he stuck around for 26 issues. Eventually he got to the point where he burned himself out, but he told some very good stories in here. And he also expanded on Buddy Baker and his origin, giving us the yellow aliens and tying it in with Vixen, basically showing that they were responsible, at least pre-New 52, for all the so many of the alien-based heroes and all that. And although I gotta say, one of my favorite issues has to be the one with the coyote, the very toony coyote, where basically we just go through this day in the life of this coyote as he's well, we're actually not sure. And like, he's from a toony world, but he leaves, comes to the real world, keeps on dying and everything until finally death just does him in for good. And yeah, he basically he keels over dead and gives a message to the buddy, but he can't make heads or tails of it. He's like, I don't know what this says. It's yeah. I don't know what to say, except it was a very good story. But the best part is the last issue where Grant basically meets Buddy himself. He puts himself in the story, meets with him, and talks to him. Basically revealing everything, getting anything out of the way, reversing some of the stuff he's done, and basically being one of the most meta stories at that time, where basically you have the creator talking to his creation. Well, in this case, he's not his creation per se, but one of his own characters he was writing, and basically he had he closed it out in a very somber way, actually, even for Morrison. I mean, basically it undoes stuff that happened leading up to all this, but it was still for the best, if you ask me, and it opens up it leads up for other people. I think Tom Veitch went on next, and it's still a classic run. It's the reason why they have this omnibus here, and that's why I got it. Because, what can I say? It's Morrison. Then you start to get into his more trippy stuff, like Doom Patrol. Yeah, this is one of his other more well-known works. And the funny thing is, it actually starts more set in the regular DC universe. Takes place after Invasion, where the gene bomb went off. So you have Crazy Jane, who basically, she had multiple personalities and they were all affected by the gene bomb. But as time went on, and look how big this is. Look how many stories he had. Just so many that as it went on, he basically, so many issues that as it went on, he basically started to go into dadism and all that, and then it got trippier and trippier to the point where a lot of people say this is what kind of led into the creation of the Vertigo universe, and it pretty much did, to the point where it got retroactively made Vertigo as it went on. And basically, it started to get more mature and be separate from the DC universe, but it still started off that way, and part of that's why people keep on making the connection of, well, it's still Doom Patrol characters. I have yet to finish all this, obviously, but what I have read has been so good, and I'm just glad that you're collecting that big, huge tome. I got another big tome coming up, but moving on, I'm going to get this one out of the way, because it's just there. I just priced it there, but the show on Sci-Fi called Happy. Morrison's responsible The idea of this grim and gritty Derek Robertson drawn crime, kind of guy, ex-cop, has this cute, adorable little imaginary friend following him around and basically helping him out. Yep, helping him out, talking to him, and only he can see him. Why? Because, spoilers, the imaginary friend was created by his daughter. We don't find out that much later on, but yeah, it's a nice little self-contained story. Yeah, the show obviously had to negate how this ended to keep it going because it's a regular ongoing series. Otherwise, it would have just been a mini-series. And yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. It was clever. It just poked fun at so much stuff, and it feels like one of those interesting buddy cops in a way that's not being a buddy cop. Now we have one of the few Marvel works I have. I do have Marvel Boys somewhere, but I can't find it. I don't know where I put it, but you've seen my room. It's somewhere in here, but the other one is his new X-Men, where he completely redefined X-Men for a long time. Introducing different concept, new villains, and ending on a very not so great note. But what I love best about this is that the different artists he worked with, Phil Jimenez, Frank Quietly, Ethan Van Sciver, obviously, and just so many people, and yet, I mean, he told so many interesting stories, like bringing Cassandra Nova, basically Xavier's sister, twin sister, kinda, sorta. Then used to do the stuff with Emma Frost. Okay, not a huge fan of what he did with her there, but still, it was still interesting because in the confines of this, dealing with the stuff with the because basically he took each of the different type of regular repeated story arcs and put them on their head. Like he did stuff with the Shi'ar, put that on his head. He did there being a murder mystery. He turned that on his head. He did, again, just so many different type of stories and just turned them on their head. Magneto's big plot, oh Lord. It's one of those cases where I'm actually glad that they were able to reverse it afterwards. And despite what Chuck Austin did with the Zorn concept, at least Chris Claremont was able to clear up Magneto very simply, basically saying, in all the years you've known me, Charles, would I do that? Well, you do have a history of, would I do that? No. And then even takes the Days of Future Past concept and turns that on its ear. I mean, so much. Again, just so many different artists, so many different things, so many different twists, turns, and interesting concepts. Like, Weapon X is not, like, why is always X with you? It's clearly Weapon 10. And basically connected at Weapon 1 was basically Captain America, Winter Soldier. Yeah, actually, that's, I think, stuck around ever since then. Basically saying that Wolverine's had a tie into Cap. Yeah, he really don't have many others of his Marvel work. I'm actually sure how much Marvel stuff he's done outside of X-Men and a few other things, but next is one of his collaborations with Mark Millar, which those two collaborated a lot. And that would be Aztec, the Ultimate Man. Not much to say here. It was just an ongoing creating a new hero that was basically Aztec based. And yeah, it basically ended, it got canceled, ended, and eventually got bred into one of his other in his later stuff was, well, what else? His JLA run. This, I love. He brought back the summer blockbuster. Because you gotta remember this. Beforehand, you had the Bwahaha era. That's completely fine. But then it soon got stale. Because people wanted the big guns. And Grant, he brought him back, and he did it in spades. He brought him back and opened up with a group of new heroes showing up that were somehow better than everyone and was earning more accolades. And we later find out, I believe those were Martians, white Martians, I believe. Then you bring in a Tomorrow Woman, and you bring in, I love when he brings in Connor Hawke as Green Arrow, dealing with the key, because basically all the other heroes are distracted or are taken off the board. Connor's the only one there. He was there for a recruitment drive or something, or an audition. And then I love it how he basically gets to find his father's trick arrows. And he just looks at him and says, "Dad, you'll be the death of me." And then he later confronts the key using a boxing glove arrow. And the key says, "You realize how ridiculous this was? You're telling me." But the other thing I love best about this is that during his tenure, there was a lot of status quo shakeups. He handled them all beautifully. Like, he actually did handle, he's one of the few who handled Electric Blue Superman very well. Think about that a second. Electric Blue. He made work and made awesome. He kept on, like Kyle Rayner. He's one of those people that made people start to love Kyle. Him and Ron Mars. Then you had, when that brief time when instead of Wally West, it was Wallace West. He handled him pretty well as well, and accordingly. Just so many different things that were done in here, and yet he kept it going. A lot of stuff, it set some other standards, you know. And just having some other different people on the team, like he's the one who established the idea of Plastic Man being working on the team. You had Hundreds on the team, and the story arc she went through. You had Prometheus as a very cool new villain that never went anywhere afterwards. And then when they brought him back fixed, they then killed him off like right immediately afterwards. Why? You had the stuff with Apocalypse and Darkseid, and then ending with everyone on Earth getting superpowers and helping save the day, for temporarily gaining superpowers and saving the day. And what can I say? It's just so good. Then you also have some of his graphic novels and some other arcs. JLA Classified, which brings in the Ultramarine Corps, dealing with Gorilla Grodd and then a bunch of robotic versions of the Justice League. And also included in here is the JLA Watchmen, where because of how things were by all of this, they had to be, it was an alternate timeline, hyper time and all that. And because, you know, this was still before the multiverse was back in session. But I do love how Superman and Mr. Majestic settle their differences by fighting and destroying a building. And then they show up and, hold on. Sorry about that. Everything's fine. Majestic and I have settled our differences by bringing down a building. That is so hilarious. Then you also have Earth 2, where we basically get his take on the Earth 2 concept. And or the Crime Syndicate, I should say. And basically, yeah, you have Earth 2, Crime Syndicate, the antimatter Earth and all that. And he mixes it all in, but the interesting thing about it is, the heroes and the Crime Syndicate never meet. They can't. Because of how they swap places, in other words. And one thing I find interesting is that Thomas Wayne is still alive. And he ends up, he's the commissioner. And by the end of it all, at least, even though everywhere else goes back to normal, except for Gotham. Gotham is the only place that's still relatively protected after the events of all this. Because basically things start to go back down, you know, go to hell a little. And then you also have this little love triangle with Superwoman and Owlman and Ultraman. Things like that. Again, it's have a very good, interesting take on the Crime Syndicate that I still appreciate and would be later utilized during JLA Avengers and Kurt Busiek's JLA arc. But I'll save that for whenever I talk about Kurt. Then you have one of his first big events, DC 1 million, where basically not only the DC and the Justice League, but all the books jump ahead to what would basically be issue 1 million, which would be the year 85,271, if so long as they never got canceled. And yeah. Yeah. So many of these are good. And he had everyone else coming up with a concept while Grant worked on his story. This is when we brought in the Superman Prime, which is basically Superman being the sun for centuries or aeons. And he eventually comes back as a god, and able to do so much, including resurrect Krypton and Lois. And you had the long generation of Superman offspring that kept on marrying into the families. One of which was married into an imp from the 5th dimension, where Mixie's from. Gee, I wonder how Mixie reacted to that. You know, and all that. And everyone else did their own 1 million issues. I do love it. With Hitman, and Grant basically gave them each bullet points, except for Hitman. He told Garth Ennis, do whatever you want, Lottie. And he did. Also, we bring up DC 1 million. we gotta bring up one of his magnum opuses, All-Star Superman, one of my favorite Superman stories of all time. I mean, this is like the perfect Superman story. Although it happens to be one of the ones where it's also where it ends in his death somewhat. But again, he deconstructs and puts things back together very well and plays with the tropes and all that. But basically so much of the stuff is basically like with Superman, with Superman and Lois. And again, it's all the Silver Age. And Superman's dying. He's dying because he's gotten too powerful from absorbing too much sunlight. It's starting to eat away at his life. He's becoming unstable. And I love how he reveals to Lois that he's Superman, and Lois doesn't buy it because he's done too good of a job over the year that she gave up on believing it. Then at the end, I will give one thing that even Grant Morrison admits was better in the anime movie was that Lex, when he had his realization, he actually redeemed himself. Whereas Morrison kind of regrets, according to one of the commentaries or something, where kind of regretted having Lex still stick to himself, even despite his big eye opening. And yeah, and basically he tries to redeem and fix his mistakes. I understand where he's coming from. It's like, why can't Lex have that open realization? Now let's get into some of his more other independent work. I showed you Happy, but here's one of his saddest ones. We Three. See that cover? Kind of reminds you of Homeward Bound. Basically think Homeward Bound meets RoboCop. A bunch of these pets taken away and experimented on to become basically what real world talking animals would be like. And I love it how the dog, being the most actually intelligent, is like still talks in fragmented sentences. Like hold on. Oh, he talks in more, I guess that fragmented sentence, like, good dog, help man. Very Hulk speak. But still, his words kind of fit better. Whereas the cat, 2, is all like, stink. Boss, stink. And then 3, the rabbit, is even more, limited in his speech. But this is so heart-wrenching and sad. I don't want to spoil it for you all, but if you ever read this, and you love animals, get tissue paper, because if you don't cry even at one point during this, you have no soul. You really have no soul. And I don't say that often, but you really don't have a soul. Next is Joe the Barbarian, where basically 13-year-old kid, pet rat, and he gets caught into a wacky, crazy adventure. Sean Gordon Murphy did the artwork on this. Very well stuff. I can't speak highly enough. It deals with, rats and everything. And again, he just has this grand adventure. What more do you need? Flex Mentallo. This ties into his Doom Patrol stuff where he took a spoof of Flex Metallo, the big muscle man, muscle guy, and basically said, what if he was one of the early superheroes who had basically the power of his the muscle vibrations or something, and he really plays up more of the meta stuff like, you buy this comic now or the Earth is doomed. And more Frank Quitely artwork. I just love this so much. It's just so fun, but different. It goes through the different eras of comics as well. Again, he's really good at Grant is so good at deconstructing everything. The Phils I have not fully read yet. It's been one of those where I bought them in a set and it kind of went on the back burner. But from what I hear, it's connected with Flex and Joe as part of a little mini trilogy of different aspects of story that he's done. Then, The Invisibles. One of the biggest mind trip stories, especially. And more so than even Doom Patrol. I mean, it basically did this almost like a fictional take on Morrison's life in a way, because he basically, a lot of his influence right as he was writing it go into that book. That became almost like a life project for him, and as you saw, that was huge. Now, let's get into the main event, probably the thing that's going to make me talk the longest. His Batman work. Here to start with his Batman work. Let's start first with just his little story, the Black Case book, where he picks his favorite stories that end up having a big influence. But I do like how basically each one has an explanation, and each one of these shows the original stories that he would later utilize during his main run. But that's not where he started. He first started with Batman Gothic, which is basically, he did this during Legends of the Dark Knight. This is what the second story arc done in this. And basically it's about Batman dealing with a killer who he recognizes from his youth, who's supposed to be dead, but may have made a deal with the devil. And this guy, it's pretty around the bush, but he basically either he did or he almost molested Bruce. I'm not kidding. That's what Grant introduced. And it's so interesting. It's so, how else can I put this? It's such a interesting, not interesting, but a scary idea that Grant put into this. Then you have Klaus Janson doing full-on artwork in here, not inking over anyone, and by the end of it all, it ends with everything basically kind of resolved as they all move forward. Batman moves on. The guy who was after is no more, and yeah, it's a nice little self-contained story. Then you have Batman Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious earth. And this one is a trip. It really is a mind trip. And basically, Batman is goes into the prison. He descends in there to find out the truth. And there's stuff in here like implying that the guards sometimes take turns at Ivy. And I think this was the first time where he was questioning the idea of, does Batman deserve to be in Arkham or not? And I don't know. When you read this, I don't know. I really don't. But it's so damn good. Then, let's get into his main run. I don't have the 52 books, for one, they're in my basement somewhere. And secondly, that's way too huge for me to take out and just show off everything. But during that, after Infinite Crisis, Batman basically started to realize he needed to refine himself again. And he does. Starting with this arc, first we start off with the Son of Batman, which introduces us to that little son of a bitch himself. Yeah, Talia's a bitch. Okay, so he's a son of a bitch. Damian. And yeah, Talia shows up, basically makes her, brings their son with him, basically leaves him there to deal with it, and with him. And at the end, it seems that they both die. And Grant was originally going to end it there, but he didn't. He just kept on. He realized there's a good chance of utilizing Damian, keep him going, and yeah. But first, I got to show the point of how this opens. It opens up with what appears to be Joker getting the best of Batman, and with a bunch of kids all tied up, disabled kids no less, until it appears Batman takes out a gun and shoots Joker. Then you find out it wasn't Batman. It was a delusional guard who was dressed up as Batman who did it. Then we would later have Joker. By this point, we get a story that's basically almost a callback to Arkham Asylum, and that's the clown at midnight. And so all it is, we basically find out that Joker, he's recreating himself already, because this is what Morrison really believes about the Joker. He's a super psychopath. Basically, he's always recreating himself, always starting up from the beginning, always trying to, like I said, just change how he is. Then you get into the three ghosts of Batman, where we find out that there are three people who have been basically trained or altered to be different aspects of Batman. You have one that's more about the muscle, who's basically a Bane Batman. Then you have another one that was the guy who used the gun. Then you have one that's even closer to a normal Batman. And one thing I also like about this is that we introduce this one young prostitute girl who he basically gives her a card to get a job at Wayne Tech. We don't see it here, but we later do find out she does take that. And after they help save his Batman's life, especially, then we get into Batman 666, where basically we see a future where Damian is Batman. And it's a dark future, and he's dealing with one of the 3 ghosts of Batman who's still alive. And yeah, it basically continues on with you have Barbara Gordon as the commissioner. Of course she is. He does, and basically this is a more violent, brutal Batman. And this actually would lead also into Andy Kubert, who does the artwork for that, taking with what he came up with as Grant, he wrote and drew his own story where he gave his own take on the origin of Damian. And one thing I do like though is that it opens up with what appears to be Batman's death, and we're led to believe that this is Bruce. Yeah, they don't say anything anywhere. Everyone's being condolent until all of a sudden at the very end, Bruce shows up, and we find out, oh, it was simply it was Dick that died. Bruce is still an old man. We get another guy posing as the Joker. Yada yada. But I like how Batman does not kill this new Joker. The real Joker does. We'll never know what happens in this universe, but it's still a very interesting origin. Bit hokey. Andy should have had someone else scripting, but what are you going to do, right? Also, before I go further back into the Black Glove stuff, you also had the resurrection of Ra's al Ghul, who by this point was dead thanks to Greg Rucka. And how did they bring him back? Well, first of all, this is a bit of an event between Grant Morrison and Paul Dini, since Paul Dini was working as a detective at the time. You also have Fabian Nicieza, Keith Champagne, and Peter Milligan, as this was basically a Bat Family crossover. And turns out Ray survived by he jumped into a person that was usually his body double, taking over his body completely but corroding it because he was incompatible. Yeah, in other words, Ray's soul basically went into him. And they said he needed a blood heir. And they were going to go with Damian. Of course, Talia wasn't happy about that, but as it went on, at the very end, we find out, turned out one of the other allies was Ray's son, the White Ghost. And he ends up taking the, and giving up his body for Ra's to use. And yeah, I just really liked how all that went. It was very interesting, very nice. And Ra's was back on the board, and he was about to become a threat again. For a brief while, anyway. But anyway, back to this. Then we had the Club of Heroes story, which basically took back to another, during the Black Case book, an old Silver Age concept of Bruce and Batman meeting up with all these other heroes. And you had also the Batmans from around the world meeting up, as one of them has betrayed them, and now there's a murder going on, a murder story. And yeah, I found this one also just as interesting. Then we move into the dealing more with the 3 ghosts. But I also do love how Grant didn't instantly take in the Joe Chill story, where in this version, Joe Chill does become a big name mob boss until Batman shows up with the gun that killed his parents and basically tells them, I'm Bruce Wayne. And explains everything, and then points out how if anyone finds out or can connect the dots, they realize that, and they will hate you and have you dead. So he leaves the gun, and Joe Chill kills himself. Don't seem like DC's always rotating what's going on with Joe Chill. Why don't they just come up with a definitive answer once and for all? But yeah, then he deals with the, like I said, with the, a bit more of the 3 ghosts and the 10-eyed man, guy who has eyeballs on his finger digits. And then it ends with this girl he's been dating, Jezebel Jet, finding out he's Batman. Uh-oh, you know that's not going to go well. Then we got Batman R.I.P. Where basically during this case, the Black Glove, this group that's been bothering him for a while, start to make their move as we're introduced to Jeez, what was his name again? Oh, come on. Dr. Hurt, who we first think is Thomas Wayne because he looks like Thomas Wayne. He's even wearing Thomas's old outfit. And he knows so much about Batman. But what triggers Batman is that he had some backup mental programs, and one of which includes him becoming the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. Which at the very end we find out actually means Zorro in Gotham. Yeah. But throughout all this, we have Batman as the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh running around the town just fighting until he eventually meets up with them, gets locked up and defeated by the Joker, who's terrifying all of the Black Glove. And at the very end of it all, Batman, he gets back up, he goes and fights everyone, fights through, takes out the Joker, and takes down almost in the entirety of at least the main bulk of the Black Glove. Before it looks like he dies in a helicopter crash dealing with Hurt. But he didn't. You see, then there's these two-part lost issues that happen after 700 and 701. Wait, where's my issue 700? Oh, that's somewhere in there. But after these two issues reveal that after all of this was done, it basically leads into Final Crisis. Get into that in a moment. But after that, he meets up with that little young woman, Ellie, basically saying she's a receptionist now. That does come back in again. But yeah, it shows that Batman is so kind to everyone else. He then meets up with Alfred, who I also love. As soon as Batman's entering and Alfred realizes he's alright, he runs up, all butler-like, oh, yes, sir, right here, sir. I love that. It's just so... tell me you didn't use up all the Band-Aids. How's the whole extreme butlering? I believe the correct term is butling, sir. Then it eventually leads into him going on his case for Final Crisis. Again, get to that. As it then starts to get a bit more expanded on what happened in between leading up to during the events of Final Crisis. But basically this is the R.I.P. missing chapters. Then during Final Crisis, I'll get to that still, Batman's been abducted and is being worked on by Darkseid's men as they're trying to basically access his memories to make an army of Bat clones. But by accessing all of his memories and just inputting them in without doing it properly causes all the clones to go crazy, as basically goes to a tour de force of all Batman's history. But he's able to win, get out, and make his way to Darkseid, which then leads us into Final Crisis. What can I say about Final Crisis? I understood it. This is going to take a while to say, people. One moment. Sorry, getting a little parched. Anyway, Final Crisis is a great story. It got overhyped by DC, all that unfortunate buildup, kind of like with Tom King and the Batman and the Wedding. And basically Grant, he just had a story to tell. He wanted to tell it, and he told it. And if you really look through all of it, you can actually understand what he was doing. But a lot of people don't. So many people want things and it's simple. Hand it to them. Grant, he gives you all you need. And sometimes he might overly complicate it. Other times he doesn't. It's what you see. He just is cutting all the bullshit and all the facts. And throughout all this, you have we have what happens after the new gods died. Playing up how Darkseid is a god and Earth is starting to, all reality is starting to collapse. And, he does all this other crazy stuff. But again, you can understand it. You can actually make sense out of everything. Especially with this version of it, where it includes the Superman Beyond and Final Crisis Resist. Where, yes, they should have been part of the story. I openly admit it. Especially with what happens in the last issue. But, again, with how, sorry, Morrison was doing this. It's a story about stories. It's a story about great evil triumphing over good. Man, I'm sorry. That soda was really just. But anyway, it triumphs over good, and it's starting to corrupt everything until they start to fight back and win. The most traditional stories, but the way it all plays out, it's about that type of story. And it's also about the monitors, trying to bring things down. Yeah, there's monitors. And then you have Batman ready to shooting a god-killing bullet at Darkseid, who's taken over Dan Turpin. Again, if you actually read all this, actually you look at all of it. Don't try to read too much into it. Just take it as is, even if it means that, oh wait, is it going too fast? Yes, that it does happen, but you just got to keep on going. Then you have Mandrake, the Mad Brain Monitor. And, well, he's back already and unseen, but I do like how it has all this crazy stuff that the only way they can stop him. Something that can normally be like, wow, that's a bit overkill. Like all the different Supermen of the universe, all the Green Lantern, all the crazy talking animals that they brought back, Captain Carrot, all of that needed to, were brought forth to defeat him. And it was in the multiversity, which I'll get into that in a moment. But after that, well, first, just a little shout out to Neil Gaiman. Whatever happened to the Cape Crusader, I love that story. It is also one of my favorite Batman stories, but we're not here to talk about that. With the seemingly, as far as everyone else was concerned, death of Batman, it led into Battle of the Cowl, which Tony Daniel would take over in doing. He wrote and drew that. Dealt with that, which eventually led to Dick Grayson becoming Batman. And the way things would play out then after this was, it would bring into Batman and Robin, where Dick is training Damian. And like I said before, during the Peter Tomasi run, it's a case where you need a Robin that's more like how Bruce is, and a Batman is more like how Dick is, try and balance each other out. And throughout this first arc, we deal with Professor Pig. He's become a regular character, and he is just so twisted and morbid. And the way they handle him in the Arkham Knight was very good. And yeah, I just like how you have all these dominoes or bones being placed around murder scenes. And there's a bit of an ongoing arc throughout all this. Oh, I forgot to mention, at the end of Final Crisis, we find out Bruce is still alive after being zapped by the Omega Sanction, which, duh. But I did like how, at the very least, they made it be the readers know, but they also are able to accept that the rest of the world doesn't know. I like that. But, that was the first 3 issues. The next 3 issues, no nerd, that's gonna love this, deal with Jason Todd as he tries to become the Red Hood as a hero. With one of the girls from the first arc that Pig was trying to make into one of his dolls. You then have Red Hood basically trying to show off as being the big, I can do what Batman can't, and I'm going to use my force to do that. Things of that nature. You also have him starting to do social media, things like that, like basically let the punishment fit the crime, etc., etc., as Batman has to take him down. But I also do like how Grant basically reveals, Jason's hair has always been red. He just dyed it black because Bruce wanted him to look like Dick. And we bring in this one character, the Flamingo, this weird villain who, at the end of it all, then he's actually killed by Jason. But of course, Gordon takes him away, locks him up, as like, you dare, you don't know how this is, and all that. He just keeps on shouting out at him. The girl is driving off, and we see that her doll face falls off, but I don't think we ever see her again. I don't think. And that's a sad shame because of all she's been through. Looks like she's kind of broken at the end. Then we get into the take on with Batman, where Dick finally decides, after everything that's happened, he's going to take Bruce's remains, what they had anyway, to a Lazarus pit and resurrect him. And I should say this is called Dark and Blackest Night with a K. But I know this is when we have them interacting with the new Batwoman as well, as Bruce is resurrected, but he's insane. It's made clear this isn't Bruce. At the very end of this all, just like at the end of Blackest Night, they realize that, yeah, it's not, and Bruce is still alive. Just like Tim was saying. And they also use the Lazarus pit to resurrect Batwoman after she went through some ordeals. And yeah, that copy of Bruce is killed, and they know he's out there. Now they gotta find him. Then we get into the next chapter, which was, well, first in issue 800, just this nice little time travel story that I really like. It's very clever, and it ends with Batman 666, Damian having to rescue Terry McGinnis from Three-Face. Yeah, Three-Face. Wrap your head around that one. Then we get into the Batman versus Robin, basically, as Talia starts to make a move, and everything's starting to lead into the big finale, as the return of Bruce Wayne is starting to begin. But Bruce isn't back yet. If we had this one character, Sexton, who has been interacting with everyone, and it turns out the Flamingo didn't die. He's still alive, and he teams up with Damian during all this. But then it turns out Talia takes over Damian, because of course she would have put those into him, and is ready to fight and kill Dick. So who does she use that could probably put up with Dick? Deathstroke is in control. And it's another interesting story, as we didn't also find out about how Talia has all these different other fetuses just ready, full of Damian's brother and sisters, or brothers, I just simply say. Then at the very end, we see Sexton is meeting up with Dick, and we find out that the person who's been leaving all the dominoes everywhere, the person who's been doing all these other killers, the person is actually trying to be, is trying to be a hero in his own way. Sexton is the Joker. Wow, Joker trying to be a hero. Wow! And Grant did it in a way that fit the character so well. Then you get the leading into the last arc, before the final issue, and this was Batman and Robin Must Die, as Dr. Hurt makes his move. Starts to ruin so much of Batman's reputation, and you didn't have a point where Damian beats on Joker with a crowbar, as everything starts going to hell. Everything just starts to collapse, and they're trying to figure out what are we gonna do, but Hurt's, he's winning it every chance, except when the Joker gets involved and starts to win. But then Sexton and Hurt is then, further shows to point out, I love it how Joker leaves a banana peel in this issue and just leaves it. You think, oh, that's it? But Dick seems to be dealt with. We then have Hurt take Damian down to take Damian down to the Batcave. He's trying to do a similar, do you vow to be be at my side, kind of like when Bruce did that to Dick all those years ago. And then we find out about Barbados is believed to be Hurt's god, and yeah, that's something that again Scott Snyder would utilize in Dark Knight's Metal. And then Dick gets back up. They knock him down. We find out that all the stuff that was in this secret box that he saw, that hasn't opened in 100 years, and it basically says "Gotcha." And then all of a sudden the clock opens, and Bruce is back. But what led up to that? That, my friends, would be in this, the 6-issue Return of Batman, where each one has a different artist going through a different era for Batman. We open up in caveman times, which again, this is something that Scott Snyder would tie into. He ends up during the pilgrimage. Very interesting. I really like this one of those Fraser Irving's artwork. Then Yannick Paquette would do him arriving in as a pirate. Yar! And Jorge Jetty did him during the times of as a cowboy. Then Ryan Sook did him as a private eye. And then Lee Garber did him back when he was actually returned properly. All the while, though, he's bringing along the Omega sanction that Darkseid infected him with. And he has to find a way of fixing it all. Otherwise, he's going to bring destruction to the present day. As this game more and more powerful as he's going through time. And wow. At the end, sure enough, he does survive. But it's Darkseid taking the notion of Batman always finds a way back. Batman always wins. And use it against him. He doesn't expect that Batman would have a counterplan for that, because that is something else Grant brought up. He introduced the idea of Batman having a contingency plan for everything. I mean, okay, to a degree, Mark Waid did that, and Grant kind of did during JLA, but this is where it went beyond crazy. It's like, to the point of him being like, oh, plan for that. Yep, plan for that. You plan for, goes to this big convoluted list. Yep, that was plan 24717. Or something like that. Then we get the last issue of his run on Batman and Robin, where basically we find out that our Dr. Hurt lived for so long. Basically, one of the bat that was following Bruce that represent the Omega Sanction, thinking it was some creature, Hurt took a bite out of it. Yeah, and turned out he's a Wayne, I believe, and it then leads into a big fight between them all, and then this is when we also had Chris Burnham start to do some of his work. Oh, yeah, sorry, some of his work here, and he really matches Frank Quitely very well in his own way. And by the end of all of this, we have Hurt slipping in the banana peel that Joker left. And he gets buried alive as Joker's laughing, but he's saying, who would have expected that? The Joker fights crime. When there's no Batman, the grave-digging clown gets to be the good guy. Tell me, I said, what could be funnier than that? As Batman decks him and knocks him out. Then at the very end of everything, Dick is still being Batman for a little while as Bruce decides they need to change. Something big is coming. And they need to expand. Though we end with him introducing the idea of Batman Incorporated, where there's going to be a Batman in every country. But before then, we had The Return, a nice one-off that basically bridges between Batman and Robin and Batman Incorporated, where Bruce is just dealing with all these threats from a group called Leviathan. And we have no idea what that is at first. But one thing that's interesting that they find is a dead whale. Yeah, a dead whale. That actually comes into play later. But then we get into Batman Incorporated pre-New 52. And yeah, for the first three issues deals with him and Catwoman in Japan, dealing with the Batman in Japan, and Dr. Death, I believe. A guy who's basically immortal, as Grant especially makes very clear. He is very much so immortal. And he basically, at the end of it all, they stop him, and they feel like they got a new foothold. Basically, at first it feels like they're going to do one for each country, but they don't. The next one involves, first starts setting up a bit with Kate Kane. Because remember, we've had Cassie Kane. Cassie Kane, not Kate Kane. Kate Kane is the current Batwoman. But Cassie Kane is the original Batwoman. For a long time we kept thinking, oh, they're one and the same. They're not. And we basically just get a flashback to her whole history throughout everything. And it's interesting how he basically fits in, and basically has to be that Cassie was married into the Kane family. So she's not really his cousin. And then, and again, I do like how they kind of clear up some of the confusion, saying, no, the old Batwoman, she still existed. Kate is not that Batwoman. And once they made it clear about the connections between Bruce, the Martha being a Kane, they realized, ew, we can't have them be related. That'd be creepy. And then we get another follow-up back with the Batman of the many nations. Just a nice little story there. Then we have one with one thing I do like is we have Bruce reveal how is he going to try and keep people from figuring it out. He goes to message boards, all those crackpot conspiracy theory sites, and just starts throwing out those type of things just to make people like, nah, make people not really think about it too much or make it seem so ridiculous. I like that. I really like that. But basically, Leviathan is still growing strong. Then, basically, these other issues deal with in cyberspace and in Mexico and things like that. Then we get into the Leviathan strikes, which tell what was supposed to be the last two issues. First one deals with Stephanie Brown, a spoiler, going into a Leviathan academy. And then the next one's I'm dealing with a satellite as the outsiders come in and help out and defeat everything. And we have to find out about how Jezebel Jet was, last time we saw her in Batman R.I.P., her place was being attacked by a bunch of man-bats. Who had access to all the man-bats? It was Talia. And we find out that the leader of Leviathan, this new organization has been growing and growing, was Talia. Why? Because she's tired. She's tired of waiting. She's tired of Batman, not returning her affection. She's going to embrace being the, what her father wanted her to be. Basically, this is Grant saying, Talia is not the sweet, innocent girl everyone thinks she is. She is the daughter of the head of the demon. Basically saying, in other words, she is just as bad, if not worse, than her father. And I like that. I mean, it kind of derails her character quite a bit, but it feels like this is the logical progression. If Batman won't take her with a son, then the hell with... Sorry about that. The hell with him. Forget him. He's not going to return his love. So, yeah. And during all this, we didn't start having more about Bruce again with Damian and all that. This is, some stuff got undone because of New 52, but not by much. And once we now know about Talia's involvement, we start seeing like how she locked her father away. We then see a bit more from the Batman 666 timeline where everything royally goes downhill further until it's basically the end of everything because of what Damian's mother had done and what Talia had done. Things just continue to escalate more and more as Leviathan is ready to make his move. Damian's collecting new pets. I love that. We find out about the whale that they found earlier was actually done. It housed the big, huge guy helping out Talia, who ended up being one of Damian's brothers, rapidly gestated in that whale. That's why it was dead. And by the issue 8, Damian dies. Quite brutally, actually. But but he dies saving Ellie. Yeah. Who would have thought that he dies saving Ellie, a girl his father had basically hired to work there to save her life, and he gets stabbed for his troubles. Yeah, they really kill him off. Now, as I already told you in Peter Tomasi's video, that Damian didn't stay dead, obviously, but then by the end of everything's just building up more and more until leading into the finale, Bruce decides then to give himself some of the bat formula and the man-bat formula as he comes in charging. Which then leads into the big final confrontation between Batman and Talia. as the two fight it out until it leads back to the Batcave where hold on. Well, yeah, basically it leads to the Batcave. Talia, sword in each hand, and Bruce fight it out down there. As it turns, as Batman just starts to win still. Of course he wins. And for a moment then, Talia gets killed off too. How? By Kate and Cassie. Yeah, she's still alive. She faked her death and she's leading a organization known as Spiral. Kills Talia. She gets better too later. All the stuff that Leviathan had done starts to be fixed up. And what can I say? Batman basically, and that's the end of Grant Morrison's run. A bit of a bittersweet note, but at the same time, it's still a good story. It's still a great, fantastic run, and he wraps up everything. But he doesn't put all the toys back in. Not all of them, anyway. There's a lot of changes that were done. Some others would take the toys back out, but a lot of the other toys, they're still available for others to use, and others had. Then there's his Action Comics Superman run. I think it's one of the best things about, besides Snyder's work, that was one of the best parts about New 52 was Grant's run. The funny thing is, what got it going on longer was a 2-issue stint to give Rags with Andy Kubert to give Rags Morales a little bit more time to finish off the last issue and the last few issues that caused Grant to get a bigger idea, and that's why it continued on longer to issue 18, where it became this great story. Still fits around Batman and throughout Superman's history, from the T-shirt days into having a suit, and then yeah, by the end of it all, it deals with a version of Mixie, and among other things. And again, it just has the concept of Mixie of the fifth dimension and being imagination. It just grows and grows until it finally ends on this big bang, and it just wraps up. And I like it. I really do. And you just have some interesting stuff, like he's given one more wish from a woman, but that wish can only involve with the color red. So what does he do? Grant had something tragic happen on Mars. What happened on Mars is reversed, because Mars is colored red. I like that. Then we get into the 7 Soldiers of Victory. A nice little project where he focuses on a few 4-issue miniseries that at first never intersect. Not directly anyway. There is some crossplay, but the funny thing is, it tells one big story without having the characters have to meet up. If they meet up, they all die. One of those type of things. But part of this leads into Final Crisis. Others just do his own thing, like introduces Bulleteer, focuses on the third, technically, Mr. Miracle, brings in the new Frankenstein that everyone loves, focuses on Zatanna, Shining Knight, Clarion, the Witch Boy, bum bum bum, a new Guardian, like the Guardian, etc., etc., and it's a very good story as well. I dig it as well. I think it's very nice, very good, and very Morrison. I can't really get much more into descriptions with that because you'd have to read them for yourself, but believe me, you get the whole collections. They're very good reads. I don't know what else to say. Then we have after Multiversity and his Batman work, he stepped away, and a few other things, he stepped away from the most part from in DC until Snyder tempted him back with. Sorry about that. Anyway, I was saying Snyder brings him back with Dark Knight Metal Wild Hunt, where he joins in and working on stuff that basically deals with the dark multiverse, among other things. And it was meant to get Morrison back in the game, and I think it did, because Morrison then came back, first helping out Dan to deal with the Sideways annual, because that dealt with his original Superman and the other parts of the dark multiverse, some twisted ideas, I'll tell you that, like taking some of the old Silver Age concepts like ant-head Lois, or not ant-head, big brain Lois, or ant-headed Superman, or things like that, and show some twisted versions of them. Then you also have his take on Green Lantern. I'm still torn on this, actually. It's an interesting thing, but it feels way too cut off and detached. I felt like, did you really need to detach Green Lantern this much? Because I can't tell where this fits in at all. And I don't think it was supposed to. I think Grant was just given free reign to do what he will, and he chose Green. I want to do Green Lantern and the Dio. I don't want to do Batman anymore or Superman. I want to do Green Lantern. And again, it's really high concept stuff. In fact, one thing I want to get out of the way is this is not God. It's meant to come off like God, yes, but they never said it's God. He's called the Shepherd, and he's an alien. He's not God. And they're not trying to say he's the creator. He just happens to look like God and act like God, but he's not the God. So, yeah. Now, let's get into two more things. First, his Wonder Woman Earth Ones. I like them. I will get back to reviewing the Earth One books. I still can't believe that's Megan Fox being used. But, yeah, it's a nice, interesting, down-to-earth kind of version of Wendy. Really enjoy it. I can't really say much more about it. It's just very good. It feels like a nice take. Shows that he does have a good handle on Wendy. Someone who he always openly admitted he never had much of a handle beforehand, and yeah, it kind of showed. Now, let's get into the last one. One of my favorite works of his. Multiversity. Particularly my guidebook almost for thinking of multiversal stuff. Follow up the Final Crisis, where we deal with different Earths, different meta concepts. Basically, everything that Morrison's ever done is represented in this book. Everything. Right down to, hold on, the big map of the multiverse. This is what inspired him to do an additional part of this book. And I love this whole thing. Just look at that. And granted, around the same time this got finished, Convergence then revealed the entire infinite multiverse is back, which is fine. I always looked at multiverses like this 52 stuff to be a pocket in the ever infinite multiverse. And you then have the guidebook that basically gives off different Earths. And I love some of the Earths he chose, how they each have one except for 4 that were left open. Then you have Ultra Comics, which basically takes the idea of, and only you can save the world. If you value your life, you must not read this book. And what the brilliant about this one is because every time you turn the page, the situations keep getting worse and worse. You're captivating it, but you're dooming them. If you stop at any page and just close the book and never open it again, things can end fine there. Even to the point where everything's fine until you turn the page and it goes back to being shit. And yeah, that's multiversity for you. It's just it's one of the prime examples of everything Morrison, but without it being too convoluted or making it too much to think. And aside from Marvel Boy, that's all my Morrison books. That's everything I've got. And what do I like best about Morrison? His high concepts. I mean, if I wanted to, I could have bring down some of the books that he influenced, like his Metal Men and the Ryan Choi Atom. All those were from his ideas that other creators worked on. This Grant, he just always comes up with great ideas that only he knows how to tell them so many times. And a lot of times you could be, I've heard so many people like, I don't understand him. Or, oh, he's thinking above us and looking down. I'm one of those who thinks like, no, he wants to elevate comic books up. He wants to bring us to his level. Not being like, I'm above you all. I'm above you all. You cannot understand me, and you can only dream of being at my level. No, I think he wants to bring people up. And hey, I feel like I'm one of those who gets that, because whenever I read these books, my mind sometimes thinks on those levels that he goes to. I didn't want to bring it all in, because it is meant to be more of one of those type of general summaries. If I went into further detail on each of these books, I'd be able to explain it a bit more. But that's all I gotta say on Morrison. I love his work. And let's say we're going a little bit closer to the east into my to one of my other videos, and well, I couldn't be happier. I got nothing much else to say, but who knows? I haven't put my poll up yet. I might take a break tomorrow. I'm just a bit burnt out today. So, who knows? Catch you all tomorrow. Take care.